are welcome along to a throwback edition of the Huddle Breakdown with me, James, hosting, unfortunately, for all of you, with my good friend Alan Morrison. Our friend Laura is out sick this week, so we wish her all the best in her recovery. I don't know. I exchanged messages with Quinny from Seltzar here on Twitter. Alan, I don't know what the hell's going on in the UK or Scotland. There's a flu going around. I haven't seen it yet in my area, my part of the world, but I hope everyone out there is staying happy, healthy, and safe because we got a big freaking week coming up. Not one to be having the flu. So how are you doing, Alan?
No, I'm okay so far. My daughter had been at a party on Saturday night, and she said this girl that she didn't know walked up to her and said, "I'm not feeling very well," and
Oh,
proceeded to breathe all over her. And she then came home and spent the whole of Sunday feeling not well. But she at least got up to school today. So far so good. Yeah, but I don't know about Quinny and Laura and the West Coast of Scotland Brigade. Maybe there's something. Maybe there's a different strain up there. I don't know. We might have our own sort of South Yorkshire strain down here.
Hopefully we're not back into lockdowns before we know it here again. I have PTSD,
Oh dear.
but we have a game to review today. We're going to go over the 3-0 victory over Hibs, although that score line does not do the drama, the entertainment, or the inquiry on this game any justice. So we'll get into that, and then we're going to take a look at and preview Zagreb for tomorrow in Croatia. Huge Champions League game. Not going to touch anything on the name that shall not be mentioned, or the game that shall not be mentioned next Sunday yet. We'll do plenty of that preview later in the week, and we'll tee that up with some information as we get going here. So, Alan, let's start with the major question because I didn't even know it in our chat room on the Huddle Breakdown platform. Somebody told me that there was a protest going on social media about how horrible this performance was on
Oh, okay.
Saturday, and I haven't been on Twitter or Blue Sky all that much, if I'm honest. Recently, life's been a little too crazy, so I didn't see any of that, and I just was like, "This is a terrifically entertaining game." So, what did you think of the? I mean, obviously there was some horrible defending on our part, so I'm not saying there's no justification for criticism. But so, what was your assessment of the game? Are the worry warts on Twitter and Blue Sky? Do they have justification? Is this whole league campaign going right down the toilet now? Where are we?
Yeah. So listen, I mean, actually, sort of semi-serious point is I'm kind of with you, but for different reasons. In that, not so much on certainly X and maybe even Blue Sky these days. So honestly, if you like the stuff that we do, if you like stuff, the odd little vignettes, and even the, certainly the more in-depth articles, then get on to huddlebreakdown.com, because that's really where I'm going to be spending more of my energy, certainly going forward, than those social media platforms, because frankly, the subscribers and the people that come to our platform, the engagement's brilliant. So it's far more worthwhile, really, frankly, if I'm being honest. But in terms of this game, it was one to get people like me absolutely very excited, really, because there was an awful lot of kind of firsts, really. I mean, when I talk about the highest, just a reminder, my data goes back about 10 years, so that's a decent chunk of time. So and different aspects of the data go back different amounts of time. So XG models only got started about 3 or 4 years in, maybe, and packing was maybe sort of 5 years, 5 to 6 years into that of worth of data. But certainly, I've never seen in a home game a Celtic goalkeeper having to make 8 saves. Now, most of the vendors say 9, right? But the reason that they say 9 is there was a shot in the first half from, I think, from Ewan, which was from outside the box, and it was going wide of the goal, and Schmeichel flopped on it. I don't count that as a save because it wasn't on target. That's a recovery. That's not a save, right? So I had Schmeichel down for 8. I think my data definition is superior to all of the other data vendors, much as it would spoil a great story. Because if it had been 9 saves, that is the highest I've ever recorded for a Celtic goalkeeper in 10 years, right? The previous record is
At
8.
all or at
Uh,
home?
Anywhere,
Period. Oh
anywhere.
wow,
Yep.
jeez.
So we're looking
You've
at we're looking at
surprised even me with that one, Alan. Holy crap!
we're looking at. Do I have to make you guess? There's 2 instances of 8 saves anywhere in the last 10 years. Can you guess? You
Ch-
guess
ch-
one, but I don't think you'll get the other.
With Champions League included?
All games,
All
anywhere
games.
in the last
Ooh,
10 years.
10 years. So we're back to
The last
14.
11 seasons, yeah.
Well, I'm going to guess Forster got to be in there. I'm thinking either one of the Lazio games or the League Cup final in 19. One of those two, one of those three games I'm guessing is in there. Am I, do I,
Yeah, so there's two Lazio games where he had made 7 saves.
okay.
The League Cup final, the 2019 Chris Julian offside goal. I don't think it was, but I hope it was. That was
We hope it
that
was.
was eight. That was one of the 8 saves. The other
Uh,
one of the 8 saves, you'll never get right. It was Craig
right.
Gordon in Munich. We got absolutely battered. I think the final score was 3-0. Could have been many many more. That was in 2017. So they're the two with 8 saves. So Schmeichel's now equaled that, but in a domestic game at
Against
home,
freaking Hibs at
is
home.
against Hibs, right? And I
They
had
Hibsed us, Alan. They Hibsed us.
I know they absolutely did. It's the highest non-penalty XG I've ever seen us concede in domestic football. It was 2.25 by my model. And funnily enough, the next highest was against guess who? Hibs. In January 21, in a 1-1 draw, they racked up
Oh, I was going to guess it was
1.86. So
Lenny Ball. It wasn't even Lenny Ball.
this yeah, so this was so there is a thing, but there is a thing with Hibs, right? So Hibs packing score, okay, was 310, which is the first time they've ever achieved a packing score over 300. Um, but if you look at Scottish teams and who's achieved a packing score over 200 against Celtic in domestic football since I started collecting records, there's the Rangers have done it 18 times. Fair enough in terms of wage disparity, all that stuff. That's not a great shock. But if you think about the pack of Scottish teams, you'd think, well, no, there's no reason any one team would be any more sort of better than the
Right.
other in that regard. But actually, Hibs have now done it 14 times, as in all the games against Celtic, they've achieved a packing score over 200. The next highest is 7. So I don't know, but I would be amazed if there is a company that essentially that owns I suppose that's the copyright to the packing concept, owns the packing concept. I've spoken to them; they have no issues with me doing it because
I was going to
if I
say,
can
how
do
many
it by
times have
hand,
you gotten a cease and desist order, Alan?
I do it by hand, right? I think they should send me a check, and I'll send them some data back. It's like you know. Anyway, so I don't know if they have Hibs as a client, but I'd be astonished if they don't because Hibs. And if you think of the way Hibs play against Celtic over the last number of years, even when Neil Lennon was there, they do have a goal to a greater extent against Celtic than most teams do, and they seem to play quite an aggressive attacking way against Celtic. And there's often very entertaining games against Hibs. Now, not only that, at Easter Road, and I've not done the numbers, but Easter Road certainly, I think we may have a worse record at Easter Road in recent times than we do at Ibrox. Hibs is one of the hardest grounds for Celtic to go. We generally prevail and usually score a few goals at home, as we did at the weekend. But I think Hibs are really tuned into packing as a concept. Their packing scores are so off the charts, more prevalent, more higher than any other team that we play that's in the sort of the pack, if you like. There must be something in that. So this was a game of remarkable stats in that sense. We packed 54 defenders during the match, which is the highest ever I've ever recorded in any game. Right, which when you think that Hibs were playing five at the back is kind of extraordinary and probably speaks to how poor their defence is. Because I was looking at their attackers, looking at the way that Yuan and Cadden were linking up, and Kuchereya was moving into space. I'm thinking, how were they bottom of the league? I mean, you look at how abject Ross County and St Johnstone were. Look at that Kilmarnock team. That was one of the most abysmal performances I've ever seen in my life during the week there. How are they above this Hibs team when they can play like that? And if they're using packing data, understand the concepts, and are setting out to play in a way that we're going to aggressively break lines, it astonishes me that they don't do better. So I guess a question back to you is: given all that, and why are Hibs not doing as well as they could, or is it that they get more success against Celtic because Celtic are more open, and it doesn't
Yeah.
translate to them playing that way against lesser teams? What's happening here?
Yeah, so to me, I think they seem like they should be a really good team in transition on the ball, and that because they are relatively adept on the ball, most opposition outside of let's say the bottom six from a wage bill perspective in the league. So the Ross counties, the Motherwells, the teams that play more defensive, generally St. Johnston. I suspect they get treated not dissimilar to the way we get treated, which it gets harder to capitalize with pack passing and transitions when the other team's not all that interested in giving you the opportunity to do anything in transition. And I suspect they just suffer from kind of like what Rangers have suffered with, which is penetrating low blocks and being creative with against settled kind of rest defense in their defensive third for the opposition. The other part is they are just woeful defensively, and
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
they, from what I've read and seen, is that the timing of the goals that they've lost, particularly late in games, has been atrocious. So they've actually spent quite a bit of games, kind of in, we always talk about game state. So kind of at a draw or them even ahead, and then a lot of late capitulations. I don't have necessarily a great explanation for that. I don't know if style of play, fitness, all that kind of stuff good in. But to me, the
Yeah, sorry, James. They've
yep,
conceded 9 goals in the last 10 minutes, which is the
yeah,
same
and
as Ross County. So that's the highest in the league, and they've actually conceded 13 in the last 20 minutes, which is the highest in the league.
yeah. So
So yeah,
that's like
that
that's
makes sense.
getting
Yeah,
kicked in the balls kind of stuff. I mean, when you pour your guts out in a game consistently and then get your heart ripped out
and
that late in
they've
games,
dropped they've dropped points from 6 winning positions, which is
yeah,
the next
that's
highest. I think is Dundee United have dropped points from 4 winning positions. So yeah, six is by two the highest in the league.
yeah. So my sense, and I don't profess to have watched them a ton, but from what I have seen and what they put on display on Saturday, is that they're not very well organized defensively. They don't
Hmm.
have a good game plan defensively. I mean that goal that Engel scored was emblematic, where they were playing five, almost six in a flat back line, and
Yeah.
allowed us to cross the ball directly
Two
across
players, two players in front of the goal, right? Yeah, it's
across that
terrible.
entire, and
Yeah,
it wasn't like it
yeah,
was in a some kind of like micro period of transition. I mean, they were
mm,
settled. They were there. And
yeah.
somehow
It was a simple move. It was like dink, dink. It was so. See, I mean, if you
it,
ever watch Celtic, you'd go, "I know what they're going to do here. I know
exactly. So
exactly what they're going to do." Yeah,
it was almost like a synchronized brain fart of five
mm,
people along their back line where they just got
mm.
paralyzed and didn't move. I mean, so it's that kind of remarkable, um, very poor defending that seems to be endemic to them. And that this isn't new. That's been their reputation. You would think that at some point they'd be able to just put in a tight, compact, narrow defensive shape and stick to it. But this, in the chat um, area on the Huddle Breakdown, I was talking about that. I mean, you could just see right away, like the contrast between how Club Bruges set up and how they executed, and then you look at that mess that a team like Hibs, where like they're kissing cousins kind of in the same neighborhood structurally as far as how they set up, but how it was executed is just, you couldn't be more disparate and lacking in cohesion, lacking in intelligent movement, passing runners on. I mean, just a complete mess. So that's the
Yeah.
glorious part of that's when it makes so much fun
Yeah.
for us as an attacking side, because it's a total disaster.
So if the XG difference that according to my model had been, let's say, 2.4 to Celtic to point 0.8 for them, and we'd won 3-0, we'd all be going,
Right.
nice win that, gave
Yep.
nothing away,
Yep.
all good. But because it's like 3.9 to 2.25, right? And on the back of, and I'm kind of taking your role here as the worrier, but on the back of, Atlanta 0-0, but whoa, there
Right.
was quite a, you know, we got away with it a little bit at Kilmarnock, yeah. We probably got away with it against Bruges. If you start to look at all that, you sort of think, we've only conceded 4 goals, but my goodness, are there games now? Is there a pattern of games where we're kind of getting away with it a little bit, and that's not going to carry on, or is it a case of we knew that we were going to drop, always going to rotate players in this game?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the middle of a packed schedule. We know that we probably expect, because of what we've seen before, that Hibs are going to be reasonably open. So we're going to we're going to have some fun with this, and we're not going to worry too much because the positioning that Celtic play. Maybe we'll get on to. So let's address that one first. I then probably want to come on to, how Celtic set up themselves, because it was incredibly aggressive, and I just wonder if that's just like a that's just the way we played for that game, because I hope it's not how we're going to set up in Europe for sure. But yeah, just your thoughts are, should we be worrying, I guess is the question, on the back of some other, we just kind of got away with it, didn't concede the goals that we might have done? Or is it just like, put it into context, put it down to December, put it down to the opposition, it'll be fine?
Yeah, I think you won't be surprised to hear that I've had an uncomfortable undercurrent, not a large one, but
Hmm.
enough that I feel it of worry that has been placated by the disaster that has been Rangers this season. So if Rangers had been performing up to like where they probably should be given their resources, and we were at 5 points or 6 points or even something like that, I'd probably be a lot more nervous. I put out an article today on our platform kind of going through a scenario analysis, how important this cushion that we have is and how much that reduces the risks. And really, if you just do the math, like the run rate of points earned and dropped between now and the rest of the season, I mean, basically Rangers have to ascend to Ange season 2 level of picking up points, um and we have to descend down to like 17, 18 Rogers, which was 82 points So again, this is like mid 90s pace versus low 80s pace. And if both teams kind of do that, so they have to go super awesome and we have to go to be like kind of crappy, nothing, not calamitous, not like 2020, 2021, but the low end of how we typically
Hmm.
perform. It's like a coin flip between who gets to 90 first from here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the likelihood of that happening, the analogy I drew, it's like a gut shot straight draw in poker. It's like, they happen. If you play that hand all the time, sticking around uh, in 5 card poker, where you want to see the river card to try and hit your straight shot gut shot draw, you're going to go bankrupt real fast. You're going to lose your whole stash because it's very low probability. So that's kind of how I feel. So I'm not horribly concerned. But I think there's reason. And I think we're overly exposed to injury risk. And we talked about that last week about the kudos that the players, the staff, and the club deserve. Hopefully, it's because of smartness, planning,
Yeah.
rotation, training, risk management. All of those things are going on. But if we lose any mix of Kyogo, I think at this point you have to say Schmeichel, given how freaking awesome he's been,
Yeah.
and maybe Kuhn. Those three guys, any one of those three, and I start to get really nervous fast.
Hmm.
Um, and so and when I mean nervous,
So
meaning
they're
that I
so so they're
not
they're so
not like a
they're all
rational nervous, but enough nervous where all of a
right.
sudden I'm like I start doing math every week.
Yeah, yeah, no, but it's okay. That's fine. I don't disagree with that. But they're attacking players. Let's talk about the defense then.
Yeah,
Right? Is that, yeah? Is that
yeah,
is that such a? Or is it just a case that we kind of, because we were, if you look at the heat maps for players, you had Alistair Johnson up and down the line. You had
right.
Greg Taylor playing as in a sort of Zinedine Zidane sort of position.
Yep, yep,
And then you had Callum McGregor. He was actually pushed. Callum McGregor had 5 secondary assists. Right, he ran the game from midfield. He only gave away one pass the whole game. But if you look at his heat map, he's really forward for Callum McGregor, right? And he got involved in a lot of attacks,
yep,
meaning that when we lost the ball, we used to talk about one of the things that with Ange and inverted fullbacks was you always ended up with this little wedge of 5 players in the middle of the pitch to defend against transitions. Uh,
yep.
when Kucherevich went through for that first chance, Trusty was 10 yards inside Hibs half, and he was by far the furthest Celtic player back. And you sort
Yeah.
of, and you look at how far forward Scales was getting as well. And then, with Greg Taylor being inverted, and it's just like, oh my God. And of course, sure enough, 3 times in that first half, they went down our left hand side and had one-on-ones with Schmeichel.
Yeah.
Or
So
at least, or a cutback to was one of them, but two of them were one-on-ones.
all valid. Agree with all. I think the question that struck me early in the game was why the heck is Engels playing left central midfield? And again, credit to Quinny, who I watched his video on Seltzar here earlier today. He was going over the game a little bit because I like, as we've had him on, he's really great with the tactics and um, like how the players are set up and the rotations and all that. So I learned a lot from him. And so Engels apparently, and again, I'm going off what Quinny said, was populating that Hatate top of the 4-2-2 that we always talk about. So, based off of your
Was
article
he?
last week, when has
I,
Engels
no,
played the?
I'm not doubting it. I just don't
No, I'm
recall
just
that at
saying,
all.
like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you did a litany in your article last week, laying out how many different ways this guy has been used from
yeah,
Belgium, Bruges 2, all the way up through Augsburg, and now us. Different season,
yeah,
even season over season in Augsburg,
yeah,
having
yeah, yeah,
hugely
yeah.
different roles. I'd be shocked
None
if
of them was
playing.
that. None of them was that.
Right. So is it a surprise that our press, which Rogers talked about after the game, was a complete mess because you're
Yep.
asking a guy who understandably might be low on confidence to now try this positional thing that he's never done before? And I don't know, I'm not a coach, I've never run a training session on pressing triggers and timing. My sense is, based on my experience personally in coaching other sports, is that's something that has to be worked on a lot, and there's a lot of muscle memory and coordination that has to go on to make that to happen. So the idea that he would step into this and do a crappy job, hello, not surprising. And we know pace is a problem on that left side. We've been talking about it forever. So you throw Engels on that side, who doesn't know what the hell he's doing, probably positionally, understandably, not his fault. With Taylor, who might not be most, we talk about his contract status. We don't know where it's at. He might be going out the door. He might be looking at moving his family in the next few months. Who knows? He's been in and out of the squad or in and out of the team. He's not fast anyway. Scales isn't fast. You know, again, give Hibs credit. Whatever the game plan that they had seemed to be capitalizing on some of the things that we weren't set up really well to handle. But this is what the other reason. So I don't think those issues are structural. I think they were just kind of dopey on the day, particularly Engels playing there. I'd be surprised if we see Engels play there in that role again this season. Like that's how kind of
Mm,
silly it was. And the last thing I'll say is throw on top of this. I mean, I declared my card carrying member status in the Luke McCown fan club. Didn't think he was particularly good, but also, I've said it. He's affectionately Hurricane. He plays jazz, not sheet music. Like this is not a guy who's going to be stuck in one spot and positionally disciplined. Again, throw Engels into the mixer like he was with McCown as the Hurricane on the right side positionally, that sounds like a recipe for not so great as far as transitions. And that seems to be so. You throw all that together, back to your three mistakes make a goal. I mean, I think three selection slash tactical. And again, I'm not going
mm,
to call them mistakes. These are the natural byproducts of rotation. Guys coming in and out, maybe trying things in different roles. I mean, for God's sakes, if you can't experiment in this kind of game at home to
yeah,
Hibs,
absolutely. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So maybe we learned something. Maybe it was an experiment. Um, let's try Engels in this role. Like I wouldn't have done it because of all the stuff we've been talking about. I mean, the poor guy needs to just get a job and stick to it and get some confidence. At least that's what my view. So, but I wouldn't like lambaste them experimenting in that way. Like I don't think it's crazy. But yeah, it's just a
Yeah, that
mess.
makes sense.
But
I mean,
but this is the
you,
luxury. The last thing
yeah,
I'll
you
say, Alan,
probably,
because
yeah.
So I did in the article I did today because I saw some of the same stuff you did. Now the XG model is different, so it's not quite as extreme as your XG model, but it was within the top. I have it in the top 16, I think it is. Yeah, 16 games of since the beginning of Diala's second season, which is as far back as Y Scout goes, as far as non-penalty
Mm,
XG conceded. Okay,
right, right.
uh, this speaks to what I'm about to say is it speaks to the dominance that we have is that we won 29 out of 48 points available in those 16 games. So this is
Okay.
the worst of the games that we've conceded chances to opposition, and we still averaged 1.81 points per game in those games. And now that's a again I was stressed in my stress
Yeah,
testing piece. If we did that the rest of the season, we would finish with 85 points. Okay, so that gives you an idea of how that's better than the 82 that we had in the Rogers' second season, right? But if you look at kind of the groupings within this class, you have to rule out derbies, as you say. Rangers obviously are going to be overrepresented in games, and not only Rangers, but late season game dud rubber games against Rangers, where they've kind of
yeah, yeah,
racked
yeah.
some stat padding up against us in
Mm,
certain seasons when the games didn't really mean anything from a league campaign perspective. You have the rubber pitches. So if we ban Kilmarnock and Livingston, that wipes out about a third of these games. And then the other one is just some random stuff, mostly like the Hibs Aberdeen level, where you know once in a while these teams are going to have they're going to cold cock you, but they're all away. They're
mm,
not at home for the most part.
yeah,
They're at Easter Road, or they're at so that's what did make this kind of weird in that sense. Um, but I just wanted to throw that out there because again, it puts into perspective how dominant we are domestically. Because the worst of the worst, and we're still picking up almost 2 points a game on average.
yeah, 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 yeah. You know, when you throw in a good goalkeeper, and then you throw in
Oh, it's
Kyogo, to
unfair.
come on and score that kind of goal, it's yeah, they have to take the chances, is what it comes down to. So I mean, I get it tactically. I can get that you think, well, if I'm going to put McCowan on, and whilst I don't think Rodgers would classify him, characterize him, sorry, in the same way as you probably do, there's probably an element of right. So we probably need to be, the right side is the safe side. If you're going to take some risks with somebody who's maybe a bit more open, a bit not necessarily going to be where you might want them to be in turnover, then put them on the right hand side because we know Trusty, Johnston, that recovery pace. Johnston's going to be somewhere in the vicinity. We don't know where Taylor's going to be. And put Engels, who you probably think, the kid can do anything that we ask him to do. He's a bright kid. He's athletic. We'll do that. But yeah, that contagion, that sort of toxic combination, as you described, I think was kind of what happened. So that's a learning. I mean, listen, I was quite heartened by the fact that Rodgers was quite disappointed after the game. That's good. I'm pleased about that. I suspect he's actually quite pleased. I think he's very happy that he got, hopefully, no, I don't think any injuries. We know that Kuhn went off at half time, but he didn't seem concerned about that, and that he's been able to rotate the squad and he's got a good win and all those things and kept a clean sheet and all that stuff. So I'm sure Rogers is very happy, but he was, just to put the pressing comment, because that was the thing that he called out, right? And I'm with you that's the thing that's going to suffer if you make lots of changes because it's not an individual thing, it's a team game, and the more changes you make, therefore, the more you weaken the overall structure. So our pressing was I think we managed to regain the ball from 19% of our pressures. That's like the lowest that we've recorded since Ross County away, which was another spotty game.
Yep.
If you remember that one, easily the lowest that we've recorded in that time, and it was also low in volume. So the last six matches we've averaged about 155 pressures per game, and it was 115 against Hibs. So we were low in volume and we were very low in effectiveness. But just to put into context, what's a good day? A good day would be winning back the ball 23% of the time, and a bad day is 19%. Those are the tiny margins between a good day and a bad day at this level. But it actually stood out, and Rogers clocked it. He probably didn't have that. He wouldn't have had that data at the time. But
So
he kind of
if I
gone.
put those two together, my guess is
Hmm.
that your pack recovery metric might encapsulate this issue of volume and efficiency. So do you have that? And if
Yeah. So yeah, I mean the not at the team level easily. I'd have to go and look at all the individual
okay, no
players,
problem. I sprang
but
that on you.
certainly, I mean, Yeah. No, no. Sorry, I don't have that one metric to hand at the team level. But the packing scores were 392 for Celtic, 310 for Hibs. Again, home game, Celtic winning 3-0. You're expecting somewhere around 400 for Celtic and probably about 150 for the opposition. Would be like would be like your typical Celtic blowing away the opposition 3-0 at home.
Right.
And the turnovers weren't actually off the charts in this game. It just felt like it, to be honest with you. But
Right.
they weren't as bad. I think there was not as many, but they were very impactful. Yeah. So the
Including Mr.
transitions
McCowan.
obviously led. Yeah, the transit. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, McCowan passing the ball straight to you, and I mean, you basically, if you think about that in packing terms, you have basically taken out your whole team. Right, that is just like you have maxed the score. That is the maximum negative score you're ever going to get.
Yeah.
So he,
Well,
he he did that. He still managed to post overall good numbers in the game. Bless him. That was his one kind of big error, but he did pretty well apart from that. So yeah, listen, the pressing suffered. And that, as you say, that's a casualty of of those sort of changes. And like you say, when we made the change, when we made that number of changes against Ross County, and it didn't seem to matter. We were 5 up at half time or whatever it was against a team that's bunkered in that isn't going to be looking to play through the lines as intelligently as Hibs did. It probably didn't matter. We kind of got away with it in the sense that this opponent was going to be very good in transition because the Hibs probably don't get to play against a team where the centre back's 10 yards inside their own half and they can
yep.
suddenly spring from that position and they know what they're doing in that regard. And if other teams played against Hibs like that, I suspect they do very well. So I think it was probably an interesting juxtaposition to look at the approaches of the two teams that where we've made these rotations, i.e., Ross County and Hibs. And although we've got good results from those games, it could have been very different because of the strengths of those teams.
Well, I'm going to eat some crow here quick because
Mm.
I hammered their keeper position heading into the game on the preview, and Jordan Smith
Nine
actually,
saves. Nine
yes,
saves, yeah.
he had a good game. So get it right up you to me from Mr. Smith. Respect, Jordan. My apologies. You had a good game. Um, some of the other standout. I mean, I right away I was like that's goal of the season level. That touch and the finish from Kyogo,
Yeah.
and even Force
Dalglish-esque.
and will Force willingness to play that ball at that pace to someone who I'm assuming he suspects can handle it because I would venture to guess most people can't, even at that level. I mean, that was just brilliant. The other thing I want to point out from an individual perspective is when Alistair Johnston absolutely smoked you on for pace. So
Mm,
that goes back to like no, there's no replacement for natural speed, and
mm.
he's been that's been reflected in the UEFA tracking data for the Champions League. He's been clocking in around peak speed at 34 kilometers per hour, which again, just looking
Right.
at him, you'd say, well, he's pretty quick, but I think he's one of these guys that when he gets going, straightaway speed,
Yeah,
like he
he
might not
he
have
need,
the
he's not
best.
he's not quick off the first 3 yards, but he's quick when you give him a.
Oh
He's a
yeah.
200-meter runner, not a 100-meter runner,
Yep. So
right?
he got that bad
Yeah.
boy cranked up and closed that space down and snuffed out that opportunity. So I just wanted to point that out because I thought that
Yeah,
was
that's good.
awesome.
Actually, John. I mean, it isn't always the case that the player who ends up with the highest packing score is automatically my man of the match. But I would say about 70-75% of the time it is,
Yep.
and it's because of how much um, insight is in that packing data. And Johnson had the highest packing score by around, and I'm just trying to quickly. Actually, Forrest was second. Forrest was terrific when he came on. Forrest was actually second, but Johnson had the highest packing score by over 40 points. He was on 129, so he had the second highest attacking threat score. As well as 0.79 expected scoring contribution, as well as setting up a goal. So on any other day, he would have been easily the man of the match. But obviously, it had to be Schmeichel for
Uh,
that
yeah,
record breaking. But yeah,
it was one of those games where it was like dueling awesome keeper play. So that was not something you usually get in
well,
a
70, I
Celtic at
don't. I've
home
not
game.
checked back, but I mean, I suspect I've never seen a game where the goalkeepers have made 17 saves. Right? It's just that I've certainly don't have. I've not checked, but right, but I'm pretty confident that won't be in my records. But even I would love to. I'd love to hear anywhere, any game globally at a professional level where you've had 17 saves by a goalkeeper. I'm sure there will be some game somewhere, but yeah, that would be good to know.
Well, we'll stick a pin in that wonderfully entertaining game, even if it apparently drove some people to drink on the weekend. And we're going to move ahead long now to preview a little bit of preview on, although probably we owe it more, but given time constraints and the game is going to be not too long after we release this podcast because of the early Champions League Tuesday fixture. I get to watch the game. It starts 12:45 p.m. local time, so I can have my lunch
Okay,
and I
excellent.
can yeah I can watch it over lunch. But um, so what do you know about Zagreb? What do you think about Zagreb? What's your expectation going into this game? Um, and then we'll kind of go back and forth on what we're thinking.
Yeah. So I mean, any game against any Croatian opposition, I'm gonna get concerned. And Dinamo Zagreb are renowned really for as being a kind of hot a petri dish of talent, really, that ends up going to all the big leagues around Europe, especially. And I think the Petrina, the young midfielder, is their latest sort of starlet. So when I've looked at them, though, I kind of don't know what we're going to get because I mean, any team that is in a great position in the Champions League group stage and yet have lost a game by conceding 9 goals is kind of a bit of a mystery. They've used 9 different formations this season, 9 different formations. Different variants of back three, 3-4-3, 3-5-2. Um, and I looked through all their games and I was like trying to work out what is it that dictates how they sort of set up. And my best guess, and it is a guess, I've not read anything. I need to read any articles that really look into them in depth. But they seem to basically set up in a way that stacks the midfield. So however the opposition are going to stack their midfield, they'll try and get one extra man in. That seems to be what they're looking for. So, or occasion, or what they'll do is they'll kind of match up as a minimum. They'll match up. So 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3 seems to be their most common setup, and I'm going to guess they'll go for one of those to try and match up with Celtic, and but really with a view to getting numbers um, into midfield. And they've actually only lost once this season where they've either used a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3. So they've had a bit of a mixed season. They're third in the Croatian league. They're quite a way behind Hajduk, who I think they've already lost to and drawn with. It's only a small. It's like Scotland. It's only a 12-team league, so they tend to play teams quite regularly. Um, so I think they'll match up. They certainly do have games. I mean, in the Champions League group stages, their XG totals are just 5.154 and 12.96 against. But half of that was against Bayern Munich
I
when they
think there was
lost
three
nine
penalties in that
two.
game too, Alan. I think
All
they
right, okay, okay.
yeah I think Bayern had three penalties. Yeah, and I think they scored all
So
three.
the most worrying results what they had was in qualifying. They played Karabakh, I think, who we've played them, I think, yeah,
Oh
a
yeah,
while ago.
it's back a ways. Yep, yep.
Azerbaijan, maybe. So they won 5-0 on aggregate, but the XG was 2.84 to Zagreb and 4.39 to Karabakh over the two ties. And you're sort of thinking,
Yep.
that sounds a
Well,
bit scary, actually. Yeah.
this is me going off memory. I believe our trip to Karabag was one of these situations where I don't know if we beat them 5-0 or something lopsided at Celtic Park, and then we went there in July for a qualifier, and it was like a near baton Ewan O'Connor
Oh,
center
I think you're
back
thinking of
pair.
I think you're thinking of Astana.
Oh,
You're
is it
thinking of
Astana?
Astana. I think
Got them mixed up.
Karabag was like I think it was like a 0-0, 1-0
You're
kind of
right.
thing. It was like a really
Yeah, I'm
tense
confusing
couple
my
of games. I think
stands.
it was a while ago. So the most impressive performance, as far as I can see, in terms of overwhelming data and coming out on top, was their 2-0 win in Salzburg. But Salzburg look like they're not the team that
They're
we
in
played
trouble.
a few
Yep.
years ago. They won 4-1 against Slovan Bratislava away. I don't know if you remember, we beat Slovan Bratislava easily at home. But actually, if you look at the sort of stats from the game, it's a 50-50 game. But somehow they've come away with a 4-1 win. So they can certainly score goals against the odds. It seems to be the thing. They lost 3-0 at home to Dortmund, and it looked like it was a pretty straightforward game. Although Dortmund's goals came late, it looked like they struggled to create anything against Dortmund. So I don't know if we might learn much from that. I just think this is going to be a real battle and a real tough game. But I think you alluded to James may have more information on maybe some injuries they have to key players, so that might impact things a little bit. But certainly, this is they're going to be a high quality team. They're going to be technically very good. But on the other hand, this is a game that Celtic should be thinking we can get 3 points out of this.
Yeah, so I've been tracking all of the teams that we're playing in the Champions League on FOTMob every weekend. So they, just
They
as
don't have
their
XG
games.
for Croatian League, unfortunately, do they? That's the.
Actually, I think they do intra-game. Yeah, it's amazing how many they cover live now. It's all those degenerate bettors. I think there's degenerate gamblers in Croatia too.
Okay.
Is my
Yeah,
guess. So
probably
probably the live
allegedly.
feed for those gamblers. But um, and then this game was Friday actually, so they played Friday, which again will be an interesting issue. More rest, early game. So we've got the travel, the quick turnaround, and it being an early game on a Tuesday. I think that's going to be interesting, and speaks to the prioritization of not being crazy about how bad we were on Saturday in that
Yeah,
context, because
yeah,
of the
yeah.
value of the rotation.
And not not
Uh,
not not pressing so much, for example.
Right. Exactly. Is that I think the base of their midfielder, Ademi, and their best purported, from what I've read and seen, left center back who's left footed went out injured, and apparently they're out. And then a couple of their primary midfielders had already been out, and they're not going to make it, I don't think. So I think they're down at least a few uh, kind of best starting 11 types. The issue that I see is that's obviously hugely important. I mean, if we lost 5 or 6 starters, I mean, we'd probably be apoplectic going into an away game or any game in Europe. But what I see problematic here is I'll use the same phrases I used earlier, that only this one's more flattering. Is that they're kind of a kissing cousin of Club Bruges, in the sense that I think that they have this barbell way of playing that could be problematic for us. And the reason why they're kissing cousins of Bruges is that they're waiting on the barbell is different. So whereas Bruges, I was worried about the pressing and um, their ability to shut down our chance creation, but their ability to translate that through counterattack to have good chances and to execute on those chances was pretty putrid. And I think we saw that again in the game. The Zagreb are going to have a lot of that same ambush pressing, and you'll appreciate this perspective. So I think against Monaco, they had 257 pressures. Okay.
Okay, it's a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot. Only like 40% of them were in Monaco's half, or the final third even. So they are very aggressive and engaging defensively, kind of like Bruges. Sometimes high press, but selectively. I always see that as usually smart. When you
Yes.
see high
Yes.
pressures and not all that much high, that usually means that they're compact and smart in how they deploy their energy. I don't think they're as good as Bruges defending. I don't think they're as well drilled. They concede chances, so that's different. But I also think they're way more dangerous on the counterattack. And I think they
Right.
have way better final third finishers and attackers.
Yeah.
And all three of their top guys, Piazza, they say it. I heard people say it this week, and I'm like, it's spelled Pjaca. Unless I heard someone else enunciate that, there's no way in hell I was ever
That's
coming up with
yeah.
Piazza.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been
Pjanic. Yeah.
Jacka.
Pjanic. Given that it's Pjanic, then Piazza. That kind of makes sense. Yeah.
Would have been Jacka coming out of JUCO language. But they have this big striker that they think they signed from Rijeka, and then
Mitrovic. Yeah.
and the guy that plays on the right when they're playing with 3 attackers. Now, the other part, and I don't know. So they've set up a lot in Europe so far, particularly in the Champions League group stages, in some variation of 5-3-2. or 3-5-2. So I think that'll be interesting. The big unknown is with the injury load that they have, what do they end up doing shape wise? I think that Monaco game is a pretty good analog for us because, um, Monaco plays more 3-4-3-3, attacking, possession based, pressing. Not exactly the same, and they have probably better athletes in midfield. But even within that context, I mean, Zagreb really went at him in a defensive pressure, you know, tight spaces, defensive half pressure, but still, and then counterattacked. And that's what gives
Mm.
me the heebie-jeebies because
Yeah.
if they, because they've been, I think they're third lowest in possession in the Champions League so far, and that's with a
Yeah.
game against Slovan. I
And,
think,
and that's right. I mean, at home they're like us. They're like 70% possession. So it tells
oh,
you that
in
they're
the
a
league,
team
yeah,
tactically. They're a team
yep,
that they're coached in a way that can adapt, right?
yeah,
So that I'm
exactly.
always wary about teams like that. Yeah.
Well, and so this is going back to improving Scottish football. The podcast, one of the podcasts I listens to, Kieran that runs it, has been silly enough to have me on twice since they started it. And one of the people he had on early in the first season was, I think I forget if he was Scottish or not, but he was very well informed on Croatian youth development. And one of the things that they do in Croatia is that they, as part of their academies, structure sporting play across different sports. So they're in a nominal, let's say, Zagreb Youth Academy playing football, but they'll have them playing basketball. They'll have them playing, I'm biased. That's how I
Yeah.
grew up. Like, I think you learn spatial intelligence and problem solving and
Yeah.
all that
Agreed.
stuff.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing is that they have a lot of Croatian players. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
something that's not necessarily as normal for us relative to Scottish players. So I think four of the five guys that came off the bunch Friday were Croatians and young Croatians. So I suspect that they're the way they bring up their players is in a way that they're going to be able to adapt and to think more. And is one of my pet peeves, as you know, that people treat footballers if they're morons, and that, their human capacity is a lot more than what's asked of them intellectually. So I'm gonna be fascinated. Like, if I was a gambling man, I won't say if I am or not. I would bet that they line up some variation of like 3-4-1-2 or 3-4-2-1 or 3-5-2, but we'll see. And when they were set up in 5-3-2, it was flat five, three narrow, kind of 2-1 or flat three, and then the two up top. And then just again, it's horrifying when you think about what just happened on Saturday.
Mm.
Extenuating circumstances, everything that we just went through. But these guys know how to counterattack, and they've got pace
Mm.
wide, and they've got guys that if you give them a sniff, you give them a half a yard within 20 yards, and they can top shelf it. And so, that's the exact opposite of what we had to worry about with Bruges, even though they kind of got a lot of the same
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
threatening parts. So this is the type of game where I am thrilled that we have Casper Schmeichel. I suspect we're going to need him on at least a couple of occasions. I'd be shocked if Zagreb are not able to hurt us on the counterattack at least multiple times. I'm not saying we're going to lose the game. I'm not like apoplectic about the relative matchup here. It's just we gotta have our act together on our pressing and in transition. And I'd be shocked if it's not CCV and Trusty. I also would probably lean towards Valle because of the pace and the
Yeah.
recovery pace.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's not because I think Taylor's been fine, and I've mentioned I'm not like some pom pom waiver for Valle. I think he's got major issues on the ball, but um, we're going to need.
Well, if they are going to set up, and I'll be honest with you, I'd be surprised if they set up with three at the back. But if they do, then that definitely speaks to having Vai, because you want to create overloads on the wide areas, and have pace in those wide areas, because it's always difficult, playing against, when you're a three playing against that. Whereas if you've got Taylor inverted, only is that a transition risk, it kind of
Yeah.
probably plays into the area of the pitch they want to absolutely crowd with as many players as they possibly can. So I'm with you. Tactically, that would suggest to me that Bailly would be the better option.
Well, that's the thing. If they do come out a little more front footed, they've been vulnerable to the counterattack, and
Yeah.
that's right in our wheelhouse.
Mm.
So for the most part, um, Zagreb have been run pretty well. They typically have pretty cagey managers, so I'd be particularly the way they've been setting up in Europe. I'd be pretty surprised, given their injuries, in particular, if they come out like attacking 4-2-3-1 and are willing to expose those younger, lesser experienced players to our front three on counterattacks. I mean, I don't think they have the people that can handle it. So, yeah, I suspect there'll be more mid block, deep block, ambush, high press on occasion, and then try to counterattack us to death. Um,
Yeah.
which, that's what I've been worrying about for all these months. So
I know, I
it's
know.
going to be
We sure
interesting.
we've seen a I think Celtic have been good where they are just really just patient on the ball. It may not make thrilling watching, but they're trying to draw players out. They're not, not falling for the traps that are being set for them. Aberdeen set up with quite a nice 4-3-3 mid block that I thought was all designed to counter attack, right? And that's Jimmy Tolline's. He's always his thing. Elsewhere, that was his big strength, and he kind of went back to basics in that regard, tactically in his own sort of wheelhouse, really, for that game up at Bitodre. But we simply refused to engage with their pressing traps. Now this is a different animal, like you say. It's going to be technically far better players, probably a lot more speed and ability to break forward. But all that, I think I was reading today they've actually issued an apology to their fans for the results recently, and
Oh,
all this. So the manager's only been in charge not that long, and he's already under pressure. They're used to being top dogs and
right.
Croatia, and they're they're easily third in the league and so forth. So I'd have thought that the Champions League results they've had would kind of buy them some credit, but it
I
was
mean,
obviously a tough crowd there. Yeah,
yeah, in fairness, I mean they're very much in a similar position to us. If they win, which again, they would have seen us as low-hanging fruit at home relative
yeah, yeah.
to their other games. I mean, Slovan and us would have been the two that they picked out. And if they do beat us, that's 10 points they'll be on, I think. So that'll be them, pretty much through based off of all the probabilities that we've seen. So yeah, it's going to be. Yeah, I keep saying it each one now. It's going to be an exciting, really interesting game of chess tactically. And I don't think we have a lot of selection question marks other than, I guess we could, who's going to get selected in midfield. I would think the two are probably locked down with Hatate and McGregor, but who's that third could be interesting. And then Taylor versus Valle, that's pretty much it. Do you have any others that you would countenance as maybe
No,
plausible?
not really. Not really. I mean, I think it's probably. I don't know that Rogers would risk playing Hatate and McCowan, and therefore I think it will probably come down to Hatate and Engels. I mean, just again, but Engels on his probably more preferred right hand side. Still not a role that he's particularly used to playing in a team like Celtics, but at least that's where he spent most of his career for Augsburg, playing right of centre, as it were. So I think that's probably what it'll be. But yeah, listen, it's going to be good. I think it's going to be a very interesting game. So we'll have a review of it on Thursday in the Extra Time show. And also on Thursday, we'll be joined by Patrick Kasky again, great guy, analyst that is a fan of the team from the other side of the city. We'll be reviewing the League Cup final, but he's a great guy, really bright lad, and we had him on before, and it went down really well with the audience. So he'll be back again to preview the League Cup final on Thursday. And then we'll have the usual. If you want all the data from the games and you want the full previews and full reviews of all these games, then get along to huddlebreakdown.com and get yourself signed up.
All right. Well, that's another episode of the Huddle Breakdown in the book. So, once again, get well soon, Laura. We miss you. We'll see you next week. Hopefully, after another trophy and nominally qualifying for the knockout stages of the Champions League. I mean, possibly that could be what we're talking about this time next week with Laura. So, thanks again, everyone, for watching, spending your time with us. Please like, review, subscribe on YouTube. And again, check us out at huddlebreakdown.com. And we will talk to you next week.